Modular housing promised us a lot. It promised us cheaper build costs, quickened build time, but it hasn't all lived up to all of that. In fact, it's looking very likely that modular housing is, quite frankly, a little bit of a flash in the pan, and the old way of doing it is the best. To discuss all that, I'm joined as usual by Andrew Roberts. Now, let's just talk a little bit about modular housing. What was the promise?
The promise with modular housing was that it would be designed and built under factory conditions. Everything would be controlled. It would be faster once you get to site. It would be more efficient to build and get to site. But that's not the case.
But isn't it true that in a factory it's going to be all precision made by robots rather than dealing with hurly-burly builders on tea breaks and all of that, getting things slightly wrong?
Have you been watching Not the 9 o'clock news again?
Go on. Why isn't the factory stuff precision?
Well, it's not precision because there are humans involved. And we get to Friday afternoon and everybody's like, it's Poets' Day, I'm off. The quality of work clearly isn't being audited and monitored in the factory properly. I mean, as an example, L&G, they spent £670 million building their factory, over 500,000 square feet. They've lost £170 million since building that factory to deliver these houses. And now 10% of the stock that they've built in Bristol is being pulled down and rebuilt.
So, but why is that? Is it just that the L&G they've just failed? Or is it that there's something systematic in modular housing that makes it prone to just, not being that accurate or not being that good?
Well, I think if we go back to the war, we used to call it prefab housing, where it was built in factories. And now they're unmortgageable.
But some of them are still standing.
Yeah, with concrete cancer, no doubt. So the problem is when they're built in the factory, they're built to a template, a jig, and they should be made to a consistent standard. But what has happened is they've got out to site, with example for these houses in Bristol, and they found that the foundations are faulty. And building control said, no,
But the foundations are done on site, they're not done in a factory. And they would be inspected by building control. It's what happens after the foundation.
You get the concrete foundation, but then you get the foundation slab for the modular home. And it's the foundation slabs that have been built in the factory that are actually wrong.
So is the problem that building control inspectors are not going out to the factory to look at all the stages? They're just looking at the finished product, whereas if you're doing a regular build, you're getting regular building inspectors coming in at key stages of the project.
Well, that's a really, really interesting point because these are new builds. They're subject to an NHBC guarantee. They're subject to building control checks. Sometimes the building control and NHBC can be partnered together. But the problem is they're not going to the factories and doing the checks.
I mean, the article that we're looking at says that many of these modular home builders, they've actually gone bust. Quite a few of them have gone bust.
5 of them have gone bust in the last 2 years.
What are the reasons? Is it poor management, lack of demand, or is it something in the actual product?
I think there's a number of reasons, and the key one being touted by most is the planning system is failing. Because if you think about it, the modular housing builders have to design the homes. They have to put together the plans. They then have to provide those to the developer who takes them to the planning committee. And the great and the good of our society sit there and look at it and go, hey, what? Nah, we don't like that. Prefab homes in our community, we're a leafy rural suburb. So the planning system is failing developers. Now, we do the permitted development where the planning system is guaranteed. These guys are quoting 2-year plus lead times to actually get modular housing that can be built in 6 to 9 months.
So is that because of the planning system?
The planning system is part of the problem. The other part of the problem is the amount of money needed. These are 500,000 square feet, 500,000 square feet factories. If you think you've got to have a house, and imagine we've all seen the videos of a car production line of the car passing down the factory. Well, you've got the house passing down the factory. So you need an awful lot of space that's indoor, that's dry
true.
and controlled.
Now, a lot of these modular home manufacturers are actually not based in the UK. There are plenty in Eastern Europe and the like. So when you're funding a traditional new build, you're funding it with development finance, and development finance is released at key stages during the build project. How does that work if you're trying to fund a build, which is maybe in a factory in Poland? How does the lender deal with that?
Well, it's not so much the lender as the developer has to forward fund that development. And yes, they will have final payments when it comes to site. But the issue is here, there's 4,000 homes in the pipeline, of which they won't commit to the build until you've put the money up front. So what is happening to all these developers who've shelled out, paid their money for a house that's now not arriving?
What are we saying here? Are we saying that modular housing has failed? I mean, there was so much promise, and you know, there are a lot of big builders who are trying to build 30 houses in a field, and if they're building, you know, 10 of design A and 10 of design B and 10 of design C, there is some logic to getting all those designs then built in a factory. Are you saying that's not delivering?
It certainly isn't delivering, and we're still, of the 2 factories that have failed in the last month, 2 of them here in Britain that have failed in the last month, there is nearly 2,000 jobs building these homes that have gone forever. And furthermore, there's around about 1,200 houses that were in production. Now, that's a crazy number of houses in production that are now not going to get delivered. How do the government now hit their housing target? How does the developer go back, because they now can't build what they've got planning permission for? So they've got to go back and get planning again.
Was modular housing ever cheaper? I mean, it seems to me that the on-site build is quicker. So if you've got a site, I mean, often you've got sites which have restricted access, they're on busy roads, and if you're doing a wet build from building materials, you physically have got a very tight site, you haven't got the space to store pallets of bricks and all of that. So there is some logic to craning in prefab building and slotting it in that tight site in 9 days or so. And I get that, because complicated site access can add huge amounts to the build, which you'd save by doing it in a factory. But are there, with places where there isn't that sort of restricted access issues, is there that much saving to be had?
There's certainly not a huge saving to be had, and you're talking about access issues. I mean, I was actually talking to a modular construction architect specialist, and he was actually saying that he's had a number of properties which have been built, but then they can't get them from the factory to site because they failed to plan a route for a house to travel along the roads and highways, which, if you think about it,
I thought you were going to say they couldn't get it out of the factory door because it was too big. But that's just as much of a plonkerish type thing. Listen, if you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell icon. We release plenty of new content each and every week. Just want to take a little break to tell you about the Baker Street Property Meet. It's the UK's #1 property investors networking meet, which Andrew and I host. We meet on the last Wednesday of every month. 300 property investors meet in central London. And we've prepared for you 2 special videos which were some of the most popular talks at the Baker Street in recent months. Now, the first one is Andrew setting out the scene for what to expect from the property market over the next 3 years. The second talk is me giving you my 7-step guide to profiting in a recession. Now, normally these videos are only available for our VIP members, exclusive access, but for a very limited period we're making them available to you absolutely free. There's a link on the description to grab these videos. If you're interested in making serious money over the next few years, you're going to want to watch both of them. You can sign up and register for both of those for free today. Hurry, because they won't be available for free for very long. Now, back to modular housing then. What's the future?
Who knows? Let's put it like this. The company that recently went bust in Yorkshire, the administrators, when they were brought in, tried to find buyers. Nobody wanted to buy them, so they were put into administration. It is now purported that somebody may pay pennies in the pound for all the intellectual property that's been created, the systems and the processes, and take over the factory and the order book. Now, I'm not exactly convinced that when we're going into a recession, when interest rates are so high, when all the factors are stacked against the developer, that they're going to successfully find a buyer that is continue with the factory right now.
Well, this is the other thing. I mean, interest rates, we talked about interest rates a lot in this program. Interest rates and financing a building project, financing development project, the cost of development finance has more than doubled.
Yeah.
So, and the time it takes to build out, can be a year or so. So if you are building something off-site and it's taking 9-10 days to actually erect it on-site, then aren't you actually compressing the time you need development finance for, and therefore compressing the interest bill?
Well, no, because you're having to forward fund the development in the factory. And that is the problem. You're not actually saving the development finance. You need to pay your deposits, pay your stage payments to the factory in order to keep
But in the UK, for UK modular house builders, there are some development financing available because they have underwriting and insurance backed, whatever. It's the ones in Eastern Europe, Germany, foreign countries that tend to be the more the forward funding issue.
Yeah, well, that certainly is an issue, and it's a risk that you are taking if you choose to go with a manufacturer who's offshore. The manufacturers we're talking about are based here on shore. The one in Yorkshire, in December, it took £100 million worth of finance. And basically, it's the banks who've gone, listen, your cash burn is too high running this factory. You're not producing enough houses. Therefore, we're pulling the plug on you. And that's it. So they have basically pulled the plug on their finance supply. And why have they pulled the plug? They're not putting enough houses through. They've got an order book of 4,000 properties, this one factory, but they can't get them through planning. So planning is the bottleneck.
So I think what I'm trying to get at is whether there's something wrong with modular housing, or whether it's just either business practice, or they can't manage their cash flow because of the delays in the planning system and the like, rather than there's something wrong with modular housing. Another area where modular construction really comes into its own is rooftop development. So you've got an existing block of flats with flat roof, you've got existing occupiers of the building, you've already got the planning permission to put an extra floor on top, and you want minimum disruption to the existing occupiers of the building. So in that scenario, modular construction is very quick. It's done in a factory, 9 days on site, cranes, bang, it's up and running. I can't see that kind of requirement going away.
The requirement won't go away. It is, as you say, down to the fact that the supply chain itself, the lead time between receiving an order and securing the planning permission, you have to pay the staff. Approximately 1,000 staff in a factory. You have to pay for a 500,000 square foot warehouse. You have to pay all the overheads of that business. Whilst the planners go, we're not sure we like the colour of the cladding, we're not sure we like the position of the windows. And you're backwards and forwards. And they're quoting up to 2 years in planning.
So the problem with modular housing in the UK, because modular housing is very successful in the US, is very successful in many parts of Europe. So the problem with it in the UK is not necessarily modular housing itself, it's those pesky guys in the planning department. That's what it is, isn't it?
It's the planning control department that are controlling these businesses and putting them out of business and costing jobs and stopping houses getting built.
And this is where I think the UK suffers massively, because in other countries they have a zoning system. Like in the US, an area may be designated as zoned for residential housing, and you can put 5 houses on this plot of land because it's zoned for residential. And what you put up on it, yes, there's some guidelines and building regulations and the like, but they don't get involved in the look and feel so much. No one's poking their nose into that.
Absolutely.
I guess that's why modular housing works in those environments.
It certainly does work in those environments, and something that is new and coming through the National Planning Policy Framework, the NPPF, is a design and style guide, which basically is developed by the local community and the local planners that says, if you build a house that looks like this, we'll approve it.
Yeah, so I've got to have my local busybodies and curtain twitchers poking their big fat noses into how I build my homes. Listen, Michael Gove, if you're watching this, or if you know Michael Gove, send him a link to this video. Send a link to this video to any other friends in property that you might know who might be interested. Govey, get these planners out, get their beaks out of our business. Let us build, let us deliver the houses and homes that we need in the UK.
It's always claimed that it's the developers that are holding up releasing the homes. Yet here we can see clear categoric evidence of planning applications going in, and they're being held up by the planners. The land is there, the designs are there, the factory is there to build, but the planners are stopping these houses being built. Now we have a shortcut way of building houses in 56 days.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, planning permission don't work. Avoid it like the plague. If you want to get stuff done, use
permitted development. Our friendly permitted development. 56 days, you are approved, provided you've put the ticks in the check sheet of the box.
And the great thing is, you're not really building anything. You're taking defunct commercial buildings where you've got the foundations, you've got the walls, you've got the windows, you've got the roof. It's already there. And what you're doing is internal configuration and change of use from commercial use to residential use.
It's no different to actually running an office and going, well, actually, we need to make this office suite fit 12 people instead of 6. So you're moving internal stud walls around to fit where you need them.
Exactly, exactly. So modular housing, nice idea. It's going to take a little bit of tweakery to make it work in the UK. It's just not, it just doesn't make sense for people to set up these large factories with the massive lead times it takes to get these things built.
Well, the other interesting statistic I saw quoted was these large factories initially started with small developers building 1 or 2 houses on a plot. But then they worked out, actually it doesn't work building 1 or 2 houses, we need to build volume. So then they went out to volume providers and they went to the social housing market. Now there's another story altogether. That market doesn't work, and we've done a video on just how broken the social housing market is.
Exactly. You can watch that. We'll put a description on it in the. We'll put a link to it in the description below. But the whole idea of doing things modular, it does work. It works in other countries, and even in the UK, it works for internal stuff. So it's quite common, for example, for hotels and all of that, to have the bathrooms, the ensuite bathrooms, built as pods. And then dropped in by crane on site. So basically you've got all the plumbing, you've got it ready to go, and it's pretty much leak proof. But then when you're doing those internal spaces, there's no planning permission involved. So those pesky guys in the council haven't got their beaks in, which is why they work.
Well, I think if I was the person running these modular factories, number one, I would be looking to lobby government to sort out the planning issue. Number two, I'd be looking for other revenue sources rather than relying upon buying, kitting out, recruiting people to a factory where your cash burn is huge, yet your end product, your deliverability is uncertain. So I'd look for other things I could construct, like you say, the modular pods for hotels and perhaps pods to go on top of existing buildings. All these lightweight steel structures can be built and delivered in the factory. So they've tried to be a one-trick pony, an expert in one thing, but unfortunately they've got no cash flows coming in, or insufficient cash flows to fund that business.
Absolutely.
And they have, dare I even say, had tens of millions of pounds of grants off Homes England to actually fund these factories in the first place. So that's more of your taxpayer money gone up in smoke.
And the great pity, of course, is these defunct factories. There's no permitted development to convert those to residential, unfortunately. Govey, that's another one for your list.
The B2 use, But there is a permitted development which converts a B2 to a B8. So if you want to turn it from an industrial unit into a distribution unit, that's probably only good use that you can have with Amazon setting up warehouses lock, stock and barrel across the country.
So modular housing was promising, but a little bit to sort out. Stick with PD for now. It's more definite, it's more certain, and it's shorter time horizon, less risk, and more easier to fund.
And also, developers who have backed the modular won't have the appetite to rejoin that merry-go-round in the future, because they'll have more than likely lost a shirt or at least a shoe in the process.
Well, you know what, on subject of losing shirts, I wish you would lose that one, but on that note...
Well, thanks. If you think I should keep wearing my nice shirts and he should get out of boring black, leave a comment below.
Okay, folks, on that note, we better call it a day. See you guys in the next video. The Baker Street Property Meet is the UK's largest and #1 property investors networking event. The property market is going through monumental change right now, and at Baker Street Property Meet we aim to keep you up to date with the latest tips and tricks and insider tactics to help you keep on top of your property investing game and succeed in these troubled economic times. The Baker Street Property Meet is fundamentally about networking, because it's not what you know, it's who you know. And at Baker Street, we aim to connect you with the people to make your property journey a monumental success. There's no better place to be to further your property investment journey than the Baker Street Property Meet. So make sure you're here, you're connecting with myself and Andrew Roberts, our expert guest speakers, and 300 passionate property people each and every month. See you at the next meet. Get your spot at bakerstreetpropertymeet.com.